Our next guest is a UFC 8 tournament winner, a UFC Ultimate 1996 tournament winner, and a Pride legend. It's a pleasure to welcome back Don Frye to Submission Radio. Don, welcome back to the program.
Well, ladies, what have y'all been doing there south of the border since last time I talked to you?
Oh, wow. You're flipping the script. You're doing the question, asking it to us. Well, we'd love to say champagne showers and beautiful girls at beaches, but we've just been buried down here with work and relatives that we don't particularly like seeing. How about yourself? Are you doing better over there?
Yeah, I killed all my relatives.
Did you?
It's much easier around holiday time.
Yeah, we should do that.
Much more peaceful.
Well, how did you? One thing we didn't get to say to you, obviously, because we haven't spoken to you a few months, is obviously Happy New Year. So happy belated New Year. Just wondering, how did you celebrate New Year's? Any annoying relatives, or did you do something fun, something crazy?
Oh, I got in a lot of trouble on New Year, so we can't discuss that one right now. The wife and kids are lurking around, and I was a bad boy. Let's put it that way.
Wow. Wait, what did you say? You got locked up?
No, I got in a lot of trouble.
Oh, a lot of trouble.
It would have been better if I would have got locked up. Probably would have been better and safer for my marriage.
Oh, wow.
Well, for MMA fans, Don, New Year's Eve brought Rizin's show featuring old school fighters such as Bob Sapp and Fedor Emelianenko. Just wondering, did you happen to watch any of the fights from Rizin?
No, I did not, partner. I did not. We don't watch TV, so. The only time I watch a fight is when I go over to Buddy's house, or if I'm gonna, do one of the Predators predictions or something like that. That's the only time I'll, get on the internet and watch it that way.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, you don't find it tough, living without a TV? We couldn't live without a TV.
No, actually, it's wonderful, because you get to listen to the wife 24 hours a day. What could be better?
I love it. I know you've got a secret TV hiding somewhere in that house, Don. Now, as you know, Saki Kabara and Jerry Millen are both behind Rizin. It's got a big Pride vibe because I know you haven't watched it, so we just want to sort of convey it. It does look a lot like Pride. Do you think Rizin could be a Pride 2.0 and grow as big to the fans as Pride once was?
No, they don't have the money or the respect. I talked to them a few months before the New Year's Eve, so they don't have any respect towards the fighters, so they don't have a chance.
You said you talked to them. Who did you talk to? Was it Saki Kabara or Jerry Millen or someone else in there?
I talked to Jerry Millen.
Okay, and you say, what makes you say that they don't have the respect? Was it your conversation with Jerry?
Yeah. I can't. I'm from a different generation, ladies. I don't spill my beans all over,
Yeah,
I'll just say a nasty sentence and leave it at that.
What? I'm just curious though. What did they want from you? You guys were obviously chatting. Did they want you to be a part of the event?
Yeah.
Oh.
It's interesting because you're not the only person that sort of has issues with Jerry. Obviously, we had Bas Rutten on the program, who's not a big fan of his, and Mauro Ranallo don't like him. So it's interesting. And we actually had Jerry Millen on the same show as Bas Rutten, so that was sort of an interesting experience. But anyway, moving on, you fought many great competitors in Pride. Does a part of you wish that you got a chance to fight Fedor back in those days?
Of course, you always want to fight the best. So I'm sure his aim and goal was to fight me.
Do you think that's what they were talking? I don't know how much you can sort of tell us, but when you spoke to obviously Jerry Millen, were you possibly one of the guys that they wanted to fight Fedor for that New Year's show?
No, they want me to fight somebody else because they didn't have the money to offer me, a Fedor level fighter.
Okay. Are you at liberty to tell us who they wanted you to fight?
They want me to fight TK.
And it wasn't up your alley? You didn't want to fight TK?
They were so far away on the money situation, partner. It was disrespectful. The whole conversation was disrespectful.
It's crazy because obviously Fedor's got the big money offer. I'm wondering if they did come back to you with a decent offer, would you be willing to possibly fight a higher level caliber fighter, possibly even Fedor in the future?
Well, they would have to clean the chalkboard. They're in debt to me for a couple things, so they would have to come and clean the board with that first, and then we could start discussions.
Well, while we're talking about, obviously, you're fighting, and before we sort of talk about the future, this February, it's actually going to be 20 years since you fought your first official MMA fight at UFC 8, which was, February 16th, 1996, which is just a couple of weeks away. When you're reminded of these crazy accomplishments you've achieved, all these big anniversaries happen, do you ever sit down and look back on some of the, amazing achievements that you've accomplished?
No, I had been fighting for a year and a half before the UFC.
Oh.
I wrestled in college. I did a year and a half professional boxing, and then I got out and I worked for a living as a professional fireman. On my days off, I was shoeing horses, and then I got into judo. So I took up judo for about a year and a half, and then I called Dan Severn up, and after I saw him in number 5. And he got me some fights cross country. So I had already been fighting, And anybody who tells you they were a pit fighter or a bare knuckle fighter, a swing set fighter or anything like that, before 1993 and the UFC showed up, they're a fucking liar. Okay, nobody did any of this until the UFC came around here.
That's very interesting because obviously on your Wikipedia page and Sherdog as well, they don't have those fights. So how many fights did you have before the UFC? It was 3 fights before you actually had that first fight in UFC 8? Is that right?
I think I had about 4 or 5 fights. I don't even remember. But one of them was New Year's Eve, I think, up at Kellogg, Michigan. And it was a weird one. It was 2 out of 3 falls,
Wow.
Yeah. So, and the guy. They had the guy on the poster. He was the main event. Because it was for the World Heavyweight Shoot Fighting Championship. And so they had him on the poster. Big muscly guy, all tattooed up with sunglasses. He looked like The Rock, and.
Yeah.
The Rock's prime, and I said, shit, man, this guy's going to kill me. He's out to freaking kill me, And so I went out there, and I basically killed him, man, just out of fear and desperation, man. My corner was like, take it easy, Don, settle down. Settle down my ass. This guy's still breathing.
Yeah, well, it's not over until they stop breathing. So how does that work? Because 2 out of 3 falls is something you associate with pro wrestling matches. First one to get pinned twice. How does it work in an MMA fight? Well, you got to knock the guy out twice or submit him twice? How does that work?
Yeah, that's basically it, yeah. And, that was like me. I was like, wait, is this a pro wrestling match? Does this work? Or is this a shoot? And, and I kept asking everybody. And they were like, no, it's a shoot. I didn't I don't trust any of you people. I don't know you people. I'm all the way over here in Michigan. They had Frank and Ken Shamrock was there.
Yeah.
Front row. The Russian. Who's the Russian? I know the Russian too.
The guy that went into movies?
Russian from
Taktarov?
No, yeah, Taktarov. Yeah, Taktarov was there. I think Dan was there. Dan was fighting also, And so, I'm tying up the hay bale right now. So, I had all those big names there. So I'm like, geez, I better do something right, or they'll laugh me out of here. And so it was a pretty big event. And hell, if you asked me the name of the organization, I couldn't tell you if you tortured me, man. I don't remember.
Good thing is, we're not in any position to torture you, Don, nor would we. But I'm just wondering, so how exactly did you win the fight, and did you actually have to beat the guy twice? Was it really 2 out of 3 falls, or did you knock the guy out and that was over from there?
No, I just submitted him twice. I think the first time was a key lock, and the second time might have been a choke.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, going back to UFC 8, I mean, you had to fight 3 men in one night to become UFC 8 champion. Do you ever look back on what no holds barred or MMA was like back then compared to now, when guys don't often fight as often and injuries cause big fights to be canceled quite regularly these days?
Yeah, I mean, we were men. There's no holds barred. There are no freaking rules. There's nobody no eye gouging. Those are more guidelines than rules. Okay? And you fought 3 times. Now they have women fighting. Okay? That pretty much tells you all you need to know about it, boy. You know, it went from a fight to a sport to a reality TV show.
Well, the interesting
and a women's lingerie match.
The interesting thing is, I mean, obviously, when we're talking about injuries and fights being cancelled, we've got to bring up, Cain Velasquez. UFC 196 was shaken up when Velasquez pulled out of his fight with Verdum due to a back injury. Before we discuss Verdum and what he did following Cain's withdrawal from the fight, we just wanted to get your thoughts on Cain. In the last 2 years, he's only managed to have 1 fight, unfortunately, due to injury, and his fight with Verdum at UFC 188, he didn't really look the same, which many blamed on the altitude. Do you think we'll ever see Velasquez ever return to his earlier form, or do you think he's a bit too injury-prone to ever become champion again?
No, he's done. You know what? You know what's wrong with his back? He has no backbone. None. You know? So, if he ever fights again, I will be completely surprised. You know, I mean, they got to lay odds in Vegas. Who will be the first to fight again, him or that chick? Who's the chick?
Ronda Rousey?
You know, neither one of them are going to fight again.
Well, before we ask you about Ronda Rousey, the interesting thing that happened after Cain pulling out was that Stipe Miocic was slotted in as a replacement. However, Verdum shortly pulled out of the fight himself, citing he was injured and was only willing to fight Cain with the injury. Fans have been critical, saying if Verdum could fight Cain, why can't he fight Stipe? What do you make of the situation? If you're healthy enough to fight one guy, should you be healthy enough to fight someone else, Don?
Well, you know what? It shows you, the level of intelligence of the fighters. Because I'll tell you what, the only time I was ever healthy was back in '96. Okay? After that, the best I was 70%. I mean, I've been as bad as 5%. But these guys, they have the opportunity to say no. And, I don't know if they still get paid by their sponsors since the Reebok deal gets their sponsorship. But that's not my problem, not my business. But, they had the option to say no. We didn't back then. Back then, if you pulled off a pride fight, they could find a replacement for you forever. Now they got you with the contract. They want to use you. Get the money out of you, whatever. But we didn't. There's no guarantees back then. And everybody wants a guarantee nowadays. It's a different world, man.
Well, just talk to us about that mindset. Obviously, us not being fighters, and a lot of the listeners probably aren't fighters either, but talk to us about that mindset of, let's say you go into a fight, you're injured, and you sort of have to make that decision, the difficult decision of, do I go into this fight with injury, or do I sort of pull out with this fight? You said you've never, you haven't pulled out with the fight, you had to sort of do it in pride. What was the sort of mindset behind that?
Stupidity. Just plain stupidity. Oh, shit. I mean, you want to think you're all bulletproof and you can do anything, but it all catches up to you eventually. But hell, like I said, they get out of sight, out of mind, man. If you don't show up to fight, they could replace you, and they could replace you forever.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear, Don. What was the worst injury you ever had in your career going into a fight, and how did that fight play out?
Shit, I've had so many injuries I can't remember. Against Gilbert Idol, I had pulled my adductor and strained my groin. I pulled my right adductor and strained my left groin, and then that first takedown, it blew. My adductor just blew. And that's why I had that wrap and that tape on my legs. Because they taped it up and then they shot me with Novocaine for me to be able to walk out there. God bless Gilbert. He came to fight, man. All he had to do was just kick and move, and and I wouldn't have been able to follow him. But God bless him, he came to fight, man. So
when you look back,
elbows, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, sorry. You go, Don. You were saying broken elbows.
Chips floating in your elbow. Can't seem to know. I had had the back injury. Back injury. I fought, carried that around for 5 years. Broke my neck, but that was back in pro wrestling. So you can't really count that. Just little things here and there.
When you look back on, obviously, the journey that your career has taken you on, obviously you're a legend and you're known for your toughness, but obviously at a certain expense, namely your body. Do you regret going through with all those fights despite having those injuries? Or if you went back in time, would you have done it exactly the same way?
I do regret it. I regret it every day, but I'm probably stupid enough I'd do it all over again.
Well,
I'm not smart,
Don't say that, Don. You're a smart guy, but this is why we want to get your opinion on the next topic. You brought her up just before, Ronda Rousey. We never did get an opportunity to hear your thoughts about the new bantamweight champion, Holly Holm's knockout over Ronda Rousey. What did you think of Holly's performance, and do you think Ronda would be able to beat her if they did have a rematch?
I thought Holly was amazing, man. Just not just because she got a gorgeous body. God dang, you see that leg on that girl? Like, holy moly! Yeah, she's a train wreck, train stopper, man. She's a traffic stopper, It's amazing. If they did it exactly like it was supposed to be done. Ronda was a one-trick pony, and she's stupid. She's over-emotional, and everybody's kissing her ass and telling her how wonderful she is. And, you see it happens. Like I've said this 100 times, everybody gets cocky and they get lazy. Happened to me, happened to Coleman, happened to Kerr, happened, Fedor, or Fedor just got tired of getting beat up and having the mob take his money. I don't know. But, everybody, you get cocky and you don't train as hard, man, and then it catches up to you. Because of that one person, just waiting.
Let me ask you this, Don, because I think the general consensus, and some of the things that you've said in the past about women's MMA hasn't necessarily been, the most positive. Even before you sort of made the joke about, looking at women's MMA and lingerie fighting and this and that. But when you see a performance like that by Holly Holm and, her obviously boxing, kickboxing acumen, does that sort of sway you a little bit? Do you sort of, gain a bit more respect for obviously, the women in mixed martial arts? What's your take on that?
I do for Holly. I got all my respect in the world for me, but everybody else they got to earn it. They got to catch up, She came in as an 8-time world champion in boxing, She's a real athlete. Most of these chicks aren't real athletes, They've never done anything athletic, and they're not even fighters. They're just, filling spots, and, the game's got to improve for the women. It's got to.
Well, I'm very curious to hear your thoughts, Don. You mentioned before that you don't believe that Ronda Rousey will be making a return and fighting again. Share your thoughts with us. Why don't you think that Rousey will be back?
Because she got her ass kicked so bad, and embarrassed so bad when she didn't think it was possible, and. All that bullshit. I can beat a man on any given day. I can, there's no difference. They don't call it women's bantamweight, UFC champion. They say this man bullshit. It's always been women. And I'll tell you what, I've had my ass kicked. I've known lots of other guys had their ass kicked, world champions and not. And I've never seen anybody hug a pillow go through an airport. You know that? They always walk with them black eyes and broken nose, right ahead of them. I'm proud of it.
As far as her walking through the airport with the pillow, do you think part of it was to do because, she's such a big star compared to some of the other fighters that she had, that much more extra media?
Are you drunk? Are you drunk? A big star. Come on, man. She got her ass kicked and she couldn't handle it, man. Crying. She's listening to some bozo in her corner, whatever that trainer is, guy ought to be teaching Tai Bo. It's about as effective as his boxing skills are. Holy shit. She talked a bunch of smack and couldn't back it up, man. Holly came in there to whoop her ass, and Holly did.
Well, speaking of boxing, Don, I mean, there's been a lot of talk going on about co-promotion in MMA, especially with the UFC, with big-name fighters like Mayweather setting the example for guys for the future. And now there's a guy called Conor McGregor possibly being the first man to possibly work with the UFC in the future to co-promote. Do you think it's possible? Do you think Conor McGregor is a big enough name that he could force a company like the UFC to co-promote a card in the future?
Sure, he is a big enough name, but you know, those boxers aren't stupid. You know, they got lucky with that Tony Page or whatever. You know, when he fought the other old guy, Randy Couture. You know, who was the boxer that fought Randy?
James Toney.
There you go. You know, cause they got lucky because that guy was stupid and needed money. You know, but you're not going to get anybody of Mayweather's caliber who's smart enough to have money, you know, and who's going to go in there and fight and get their ass kicked. They understand there's quite a difference between boxing and MMA.
I guess the comparison with Mayweather is that he was such a big star that he was co-promoting, you know, with boxing companies. And now here you have Conor McGregor, who's, you know, a massive star in MMA, you know, rivaling Ronda Rousey, potentially, you know, a bigger star than her. Do you think that he's the one? And obviously, you know that UFC never wants to co-promote with anyone. Do you think McGregor might be the one to finally change that and they may be forced to promote with him, or they'll do it with him?
No. UFC's got their nets. They're in control. They're still driving this boat, man. They're not going to let anybody else, you know, grab hold of the steering wheel. There's no reason to.
Well, there's been a real push with fighters like Demetrius Johnson, Aljamain Sterling, asking for more money, and sort of a lot of other fighters fighting out their contract like Overeem and Matt Mitrione. Why do you think more and more fighters are coming out and being vocal about being unhappy with their pay in the UFC now than ever before?
Probably because they're not getting paid worth a damn, you know, and UFC took all their sponsorship money with the Reebok deal. You know, I mean, they never were getting paid worth a damn, but at least they can pick it up on sponsorships. And now they've got nothing.
Well, a lot of those guys,
you know how much it costs to run a camp, you know, to get ready for a world title fight? Probably about anywhere from $25,000 to $50,000.
Wow.
You know, so, yeah, because you got to rent a facility, you got to rent a couple of houses, you know, apartments, houses. You got to rent a facility to train at. You got to rent some vehicles. You know, you got to get a cook. You got to get, you got to get massages. You got to get a doctor, a chiropractor. You know, then you get trainers. You know, then you get sparring partners. You know, you're going to need sparring partners for hands and feet and, you know, for the ground. You know, this shit ain't free.
Well, it's interesting. A lot of those guys that are testing the free market, it seems like they may end up in Bellator, and some of them are ending up in Bellator. You talked about respect with Rizin and your conversation with Jerry Millen. It seems that Scott Coker, on the other hand, is a guy that a lot of fighters unanimously love. What's the possibility of, you know, seeing Don Frye in Bellator in the future? I mean, it seems like you were thinking about doing a fight in Rizin, but the respect wasn't there. What about with Bellator? They seem to be bringing back legends. Do you think we'll see you in Bellator anytime soon?
No, because I went to a couple of Bellator fights, and a couple of years ago, and then Coker quit returning my phone call. So the guy got no interest in me.
Yeah.
Finally, Don, we love watching you on the big screen. For the fans listening at home who are looking forward to seeing you in the next projects, what kind of movie projects do you have coming out in the near future? What can you tell us about?
Oh, if I tell you, I have to kill you.
All right, well, answer us this, Don. Is there any chance we'll see Predator's movie reviews in the future? Because, you know, we do Predator's predictions. We'd love to hear your thoughts on movies like Star Wars, Hateful Eight, and The Martian. Any chance of Predator's movie reviews?
You know, I might do that. No, you came up with a brilliant idea.
There you go.
It's a good idea. I mean, hell, nobody in Hollywood likes me anyway, so I might as well go ahead and might as well go ahead and try the Huckleberry, final nail in the coffin, right?
You could do you could have like a whole enterprise. There's Predators movie reviews, Predators predictions. You could do like Predators cooking channel, everything, all to do with like the Predator style. And by the way, what's going on with Predators predictions? When's Predators predictions coming back?
Oh, it's on hold right now. I'm back in Arizona, instead out in California. We're on hold right now. I'm still doing a little fighting with a couple of health problems. And then once that's taken care of, then I'll be back in California.
Wow. Okay. Well, we hope that you get a lot better, Don, and looking forward to see what happens next. Guys, you can follow Don on Twitter at Don Frye Fighter. And Don, as always, a real honor having you on Submission Radio. Very excited to see what 2016 holds for the Predator.
All right, guys. Thanks a lot.